guys, we are working on Stavros Evo transformation yet again. And as you saw during the last episode, we finished up with the tubular front end. Now you can see we've got the AC condenser in place along with the intercooler, and we did mock up the radiator just to make sure everything fits properly, and it does. Other than that, we've got to do some cleanup on the wiring here. He's got an aftermarket headlight setup that's a little bit nesty, and other than that, it's time to move on to bolting on the new turbo kit, which is essentially our stock location design turbo manifold, which, as you all well know, was what helped us set the world record for the fastest bolt-on style Evo turbo last year. And he's looking to go with that exact setup. So he's going to go with that manifold, which is ceramic coated, a brand new FP0 from our friends over at Force Performance, a new tile wastegate, and we're going to be also putting together custom intercooler piping with the V-band, or I should say the HD clamps from our friends over at Performance. So let's get started. Got some silicone on the block here in order to create a seal, and you know, it's funny because whoever installed his last time did a really good job of putting silicone on, but this kit from Evo Spec uses really nice O-rings, so you don't have to deal with any of that BS. I like it very much. We're gonna use a little Lucas oil here for our assembly on our O-rings, because Lucas oil is the best. And why is it the best? Because it works, and well. Those of you who follow us know that we've been using the same pistons that we originally dropped in, I don't know, 5 years ago, and pulled them out recently. They were like new. Bearings were the original main bearings that came in the engine from Mitsubishi, and they were in good condition too, thanks to Lucas oil. Not only the assembly lube, of course, but the racing oil that we use constantly. So now that we've lubed our O-rings, we are going to assemble this bad boy into position. The sensor has been rotated on the opposite side of the original housing, away from the manifold, and you've noticed I've actually rotated where the references, they call it a vane, the large vane and the small vane, they're now rotated. We remove that bolt and flip it 180 degrees so that it's where it should be along with the sensor. It's basically got to follow the sensor now that the sensor's on the other side, otherwise timing would be off by 180 degrees. Just finished trimming up this bumper. It's getting cold out here in Chicago, as you can see. I've got my sweatshirt on now and some pants. Different day. But summarizing what we've done now at this point is get this bumper trimmed up now that we've fit the intercooler, and the quick release tabs are all on. This thing is really, really tight. It's a 6-inch intercooler core from ETS, Extreme Turbo Systems, and mine's a 5-inch. I've never installed a 6-inch to my knowledge, but man, I had to trim a lot of this bumper. As you can see, it's extremely tight fit. And we're gonna go ahead and just pull it off real quick. Wants to work. There we go. It's a little tight, needs to be adjusted. And as you can see, we've got it all nice and trimmed up. The next thing that we want to do, aside from make that small adjustment on this side, is we want to fit this driver or passenger side intercooler pipe, which is going to require me removing the intercooler and welding on a vibrant ferrule end for the HD clamp. The ferrule end itself is simply an aluminum end that has an O-ring which goes around it, and then each end of the pipe essentially goes together like this with its own O-ring. And then this is the clamp itself with a pin. And if I can actually find where the ring is, which is on the pipe itself that we've already made. This actually goes around each one of the ends, and then you clamp it that way. It's as simple as that. It's super effective, super simple, super fast. These are the same design that I had on my own vehicle. As a matter of fact, this is the old pipe off of the Black Zenith Evo from last year's configuration before we went forward facing, which is now going to be going on this vehicle. So we may or may not have to adjust it slightly given any variances between the 6-inch intercooler port and the 5-inch, but luckily I know a guy that can weld. So radiator that we're about to cut, just like we cut the brand new $1,000 plus intercooler. This is what we do. Go into our box of goodies from Vibrant here. Oh, what do you know? Dash 12. Oh wait, no, it's not dash 12, but dash 16. we are moving right along, as you can see on Stavros' build. Just tightening up a couple of pieces of titanium hardware and putting some titanium washers in here that I finally received. As you can tell, we are not cutting any corners on this build. So far we've got our intercooler mounted, we've got our tubular front end with AC built, we've got our passenger side intercooler piping with Vibrant HD clamp built, and now we're moving on to all the AN fittings for our water lines. The last thing we did was weld on some Vibrant male -16 bungs onto, or I guess ends, AN fittings onto the ends of the outlets of both the upper and lower inlet and outlet for the radiator. So the next piece is to start building some of the AN lines that go with them. And then after we do the upper AN line, in order to do the lower one, we're going to have to remove and replace the rear water pipe. Now we've actually already custom made a replacement water pipe that has the AN fittings to go along with it. So this is basically for the heater core, and then this one would be for the turbo cooling line as well as the lower radiator. And then this particular fitting here actually pops right into the water pump, and it bolts right up like factory. It just is made out of stainless. We've got it powder coated so that it doesn't rust, and should be a lot better as far as longevity when it comes to using the AN fittings over the OEM brittle. I'm not really sure what the material is. It's some sort of metal composite, but it does tend to bend easily and over time can crack and break on you. Plus, dealing with how it's designed and where it's fit can be a little bit of a hassle sometimes, especially if you're working with one of my scatter shields. You know how tight the clearances are in there. So we took that into consideration when developing this water pipe, and hopefully everything fits really, really nicely together. Now you're probably asking yourself, man, that's a great product. I really hope that that's something that'll be available soon. It will. I actually built a jig at the same time as developing this. So assuming I don't have any changes to this piece in itself, I already have a jig built and can reproduce these over and over just like any of the other products that I have. So stay tuned for that. Still need to determine that it fits and works properly. I like to test all my products before they hit the market. So once Stavros' car is up on the road and we know that it all works properly, no leaks, no changes in terms of design, we'll figure out appropriate market pricing and release to you guys. So be patient with us and stay tuned. We're continuing to bring out new products to the Evo marketplace. So without further ado, I'll stop babbling on and let's move forward on building some AN lines, and then we'll go ahead and start taking apart all this stuff here. We're going to remove the OEM intake manifold, the strut tower bar, and then we'll go ahead and move on to that lower water pipe. The reason we're removing the intake manifold isn't just because of the water pipe. It's because we are going to be upgrading that to a JMF billet intake manifold in the process. And clearly removing the OEM one out of the way while we're doing the water pipe is going to make our job a lot easier. So let's get started. We're going to use 2 straight -16 hose ends for Vibrant Performance in order to make our connections on the upper radiator hose. And then we're going to use, of course, Vibrant -16 braided line in order to build those. Flush the area with goodies. That's not it. This is it. And it's already open. You know, you always gotta save those random extra pieces that you get from projects that you're working on, because you never know when they're gonna just fit perfectly. Wow. And although this is pretty close, it's going to need a slight trimming, but that's beautiful. I love it when that happens. What do you do when you're assembling stuff? Lucas Oil Assembly Lube. Always. You don't have to use Lucas Oil assembly lube. You can use Lucas oil. It all works as long as it's Lucas. It works. But I like to use assembly lube because it's for assembling stuff. We've lubricated the outside perimeter of the hose, which is keeping all the fray in by using a really small piece of electrical tape. And then we've lubricated the inside of the hose along with the inside of the fitting that's going to now slide onto here. So you just want to make sure that you have no frays or no pieces of material that are sticking outside of the fitting as you're pressing it on, and you just want to kind of slowly rotate it and push. Now, that's not the way to do this all the way on. You're going to kill yourself and you're going to wear yourself out doing that. So there's a lot of methods that people use. Some people like to clamp it down and do that. The best way to do this is to just take a hammer that will not damage it. So I use this rubber hammer and just smack that bit. And there's a little lip in there that's just below the threads. That's the top point for the hose. And you want to try and get it all the way up to that, if not as close as you can without creating any damage. Now, you don't have to get it all the way up to that, but to create the best seal, I recommend doing that. So there you go. You can see we're all the way up against those threads now. Then you're going to want to take this and fitting holding tool, which holds it at the same shape that it's designed, so that if you're putting a little pressure on it, it's not going to deform the shape of this fitting. That's the most common issue people run into when they're building these AN lines, is they're using a traditional shaped vise to hold it, and they're putting too much pressure on it, which is actually misshaping it. It's creating an oval instead of the circle shape that it's supposed to be, and that's when you start to get cross threading, and then you ruin the fittings. And I mean, we've all done it. I've done it myself, where you take a really nice brand new fitting and somehow it just doesn't want to thread in, and when it does, it cross threads. That's what's happening. So highly recommend you get one of these vice clamp jaws, which Vibrant Performance sells. There's a number of brands that offer them, of course, online, but it's essentially an aluminum jaw that's the same shape of the fitting itself, and it prevents any of those things from happening while you're assembling them. So you just gotta clamp it on there just enough so that it doesn't slide down like that, and you don't want to put any more force than it needs in order to create that clamp without moving it. And as soon as you do that, you start pushing that on. Now, the one thing that I did forget to do is you also want to put some oil on the threads. It's highly recommended during assembly, because not only is that going to help prevent them from cross threading, but it's also going to help start the threading process and make sure that it's good. So shout out to Cole Duran out there in Colorado. Cole was the one that taught me this many years ago, and it works every time like a charm. So make sure you put oil on the threads of your AN fittings as you're assembling them. Now we're going to build the other side. We need to make sure that we cut it right. So most people would just kind of have this thing assembled, put it back together really quick and use it as an example. Most people would just kind of mark it up like this and go, okay, if I've got the fitting on all the way here, then this point right here is the point. No. You got to remember, there's that little lip with threads in there, so you've got to come out about 1/4 of an inch, and that's your point. So what I'll do typically is I'll pull this thing off to get a real measurement off of that thing realistically. It's been a little while since I've actually built one. Just take a little rough measurement here and say it's about 1/4 of an inch roughly. So if I do that, that puts me, man, you can even see it right here. It's kind of funny. So this guy is actually going to want to be so here's our point right there. Take this out 1/4 of an inch. There's your mark. Boom. Now you know exactly where that thread is going to end up, and we'll be right up against it. It'll be a nice tight fit.